The Walpurgisnacht events contain the most prestige banners in all of Limbus company, as they appear for a limited amount of time and the units within them are inaccessible until the next one. And now that the 9th Walpurgisnacht is upon us, I think there's no better time to update my year-old Walpurgisnacht identity tier list. I don't need to tell you guys what a tier list is. It's the single most divisive piece of content, and it will induce some heated discussion. That being said, allow me to lay down some ground rules for how I am going to grade identities for this list. The Ultranum here Walpurgisnacht unit tier list is not aimed at complete beginners, and all identities will be placed in tiers according to their strength while considering other options for their slots in optimized teams, the state of their archetypes, and all the synergies they might have access to. Basically, we're not looking at identities in a vacuum, which means that this list might be a bit harsher than what you're used to, but that is the Ultranum way. Anyways, we're gonna go in chronological order for this one, beginning with Walp 1 and then ending with the brand new Dawn office. And don't you dare skip to the end of the video and then go and complain about the placements, as each one will be explained by me. But before we start, I have to remind you guys that most of my viewers are not subscribed. And if you find yourself coming back to my videos or end up enjoying this one, consider subscribing. It takes just 1 second and helps me out a lot. Now let's get to the tier list. The first identity on the chopping block is Hook Hong Lu, a 2-star bleed identity that saw some use on release but has not been relevant for years now. Not only did Hook get mocked by Kurokumo Honglu, another 2-star identity, after we got the Season 5 Kurokumo duo, but Season 7 also gave us both Ruin Nursefather and Chunnokun Honglu, both of whom are formidable bleed options. Additionally, his greater niche of count infliction has been getting more and more irrelevant due to Sanguine Desire, Ring Faust, and the overall increase in better count infliction on the team. Not to mention, Hook's infliction is not even consistent, with count being locked behind heads hits and speed-based conditionals. Overall, Hook Lu is a product of his time, and the many changes to his archetype over the years have completely erased any trace of his past presence. Hook Hong Lu goes straight into the E tier. Regret Faust is the other unit from the first Walp, and she similarly faces a lot of issues. Faust is a decently generic, albeit underpowered, tremor unit, with access to a triple burst skill 3, some OK inflictions, and strong debuffs. While it's obvious a unit of her era would get replaced with time due to numbers rising with power creep, the actual aspect of Regret Faust that ruined her is her speed. This identity is deliberately slow, at 3 to 6 speed with access to self-bind, reflecting the gimmick of the Forsaken Murderer. However, in Season 4, Faust received one of, if not the single most important ego skill in the entirety of the Tremor archetype: Everlasting. This skill provides a powerful entanglement for 1 turn, allowing the player to combine damaging tremor types and get bonus value from them, which leads to extremely fast boss kills. Thing is though, due to Everlasting only being active on the turn that it's used on, and due to conversions needing a pre-setup entanglement to actually enable the combo, you really want Faust to be fast while using this ego, which is the exact opposite of what Regret is. Season 6 gave us Mao Faust, and to this day, she's the preferred option for Everlasting usage in short fights. And with the release of the new Yuna Faust, the long fight door has been closed on Regret as well. Do I think she's E tier? Nah, no way. She has a large design flaw, but her numbers and debuffs are actually worth something. And her early Limbus AoE was actually pretty nice and useful. And this is Faust is getting placed in the D tier, a bit above Hong Lu. Next up, Walp 2, and the second exclusive 2-star identity, Lantern Dawn. Dawn is a Rupture unit without much damage, but with some count-friendly skills, Gluttony Generation and decent coinage. Dawn is a unit that I have talked about in the past, and nothing really changed for her since then, as Rupture hasn't been getting new content. She can act as a comfort pick, and she does not rely on any gimmick that needs the enemy to cooperate, like the Mao counters for example, so she's super consistent. That being said, Lantern Dawn doesn't exactly push the team forward at all, so while she is a great stopgap solution before you get a full Rupture team, there are a bunch of other identities, mainly of the Heisho variety, that you would want to use instead, with the exception of some niche strategies. Again, she's not hook levels of hopeless, and her design is fine, but Dawn is a victim of power creep. Another D tier, and honestly, she's ahead of Faust. Next up, Magic Bullet Outis, and this one will probably confuse you. But the general Limbus player base is pretty slow when it comes to meta changes, so let me bring you up to speed. Magic Bullet used to be considered the cornerstone of Burn, as her Dark Flame effect provided the usually weak status with a way to actually deal good damage for the time, making Dark Flame the win condition. However, Dark Flame needs to be stacked up while you're also stacking up Burn, so the ceiling of 700 Pride damage is actually a one-off number that you get multiple turns deep after hitting for some measly 200 or 300 on the way there. Once other statuses got their win conditions, Dark Flame Burn swiftly dropped to number 5 out of 5, and stayed at the bottom since. Dark Flame is not unsavable in a vacuum, but the way Magic Bullet Outis inflicts it reduces its value by a lot. The identity itself does very little other than inflict a little bit of the effect here and there, while very slowly scaling, and the ego pulls all the weight. In the meantime, Scorch and Direct Burn activations skyrocketed in value, and Burn identities started getting high physical damage, so Magic Bullet Outis became virtually obsolete. She used to be pretty valuable though, and she can still be saved with some future content, so Outis will not be joining the rest, as she is going to be our first entry in the C tier. Now we have Walp 3, and its one and only identity, Dawn Office Fixer Sinclair. Sinclair has had a very volatile couple of months recently, as he received a good ego, insanely powerful direct buffs from units that we will discuss later, and his archetype got greatly upscaled in multiple of its variations. If previously Dawn Sinclair was our often overrated burn potential man, he has now realized that potential, and Sinclair has become a unit that can contest even the House of Spider score for a slot in certain scenarios. I talk more about his buffs in my video on the Season 7 Dawns, and I highly recommend you check it out for extra context. But in short, Sinclair went from a gimmicky and inconsistent burn potency merchant to a unit with actually formidable offenses, still the same old great burn potency, but no cancerous gimmicks and a bunch of new synergies. Sinclair will be enjoying his spot at the bottom of A tier for this, as he has finally gotten out of the trenches with the release of the 9th Walpurgisnacht. You'll love to see it. Also, RIP Thumb Sinclair and U Sinclair I guess, they simply can't keep up with the ludicrous amount of buffs that Dawn has received. Next up we have the 4th Walpurgisnacht, and Red Ace and Penitence Ryoshu, whose ranking might piss some people off. Ryoshu is an identity I have long had beef with, as she is a Season 4 Charge Bleed hybrid that has some questionable design choices. So let's look at all of those. First off, her setup speed. Rep Ryoshu is an old school charge identity, so she sets up with skills 1 and 2 to nuke with her skill 3. However, the setup is unnaturally long, requiring 15 of each charge type, and on top of that, you're incentivized to go for 20 because a large amount of her damage is locked behind that. Speaking of her damage, Ryoshu basically tickles the enemy nowadays. Of course, that is to be expected considering her age, but the funny thing is that even at the time of her release, she couldn't directly outdamage Warp Corp Ryoshu, who has been in the game for 2 seasons longer, and who sets up her damage far faster. On the bleed side of her kit, she's a unit with absolutely 0 count, and only potency. Now, that on its own is not that big of a transgression, but get this, her potency needs to scale. That's right, Rep Ryoshu's max bleed potency is locked behind turns spent in the fight, all the while bleed potency is usually needed as quickly as possible. She is slow in every way imaginable, and her only saving grace for a while was the fact that the Contempt O ego was good, and there was no better user for it at the time. And then we got better bleed Ryoshus, Charge disappeared as an archetype, and Envy Resonance got filled up with actually good identities. I know it hurts to see her cool visual design this low, but Red Eyes and Penitence Ryoshu is going straight into the E tier. And now we're moving on to the next unit from the same event, Solemn Lament Yisang. Last time I made the tier list, he was placed in a pretty controversial spot, as I did not give him a top ranking like some people expected. And I am not going back on my decisions of the past, but I have to tell you that this guy has been getting the absolute king treatment ever since that video got released. Not only did every sinking identity that released in late Season 6 and all of Season 7 give more value to Solemn Lament than Spicebush, but the newest Durante is also better on this guy, and the last 2 Walpurgisnacht events feature ego skills with tons of coins. Speaking of ego skills, Solemn Lament got a whole sync ego, and while the sync part doesn't really do much, it's generally a hugely overstated ego skill, with Count Infliction, 5 coins, and 2 whole turns of Gloom Resist down on top of more things. Inferior people deny greatness to push their agendas, but I am not here to do that. As much as I might like Spicebush, Solemn Lament is the absolute greatest Walpurgisnacht identity available currently, and he will be taking his rightful place at the very pinnacle of the S tier. If you want to build sinking, this is your win condition, and it's kind of funny that he and Ryoshu were part of the same banner. With this, we're moving on to the 5th Walpurgisnacht event, and the 2 identities that it added. Full Stop Office Heathcliff and Honglu. These 2 units are a duo of pure poise, pierce damage dealers, who are tied at the hip with the huge amount of synergy that they have. Back when they first came out, they took the game by storm, but time has not been kind to the Blowjob brothers. Their 2 sources of value are their damage and pierce fragility, and the damage numbers in Limbus Company have been rapidly inflating over the past year. As such, with more time passing, the Full Stop Office keeps falling lower and lower on the list. But they are not all too bad yet. See, these 2 little guys are pierce damage dealers, meaning they work great against pierce weak targets. And while they have been grossly outclassed in general damage output, basically all notable identities over the past year use slash damage, meaning that there aren't that many units contesting the specific pierce niche, with only really Knight of Despair being another super good pierce unit. This is why Heathcliff and Honglu might still pop up here and there, and are overall not that bad. Of course, there currently isn't a particularly good use case for them, but if we ever do get an important Pierce Week boss, they could very well leave a mark on the meta once again. But, of course, we're in Potential Man territory at this point, which is why the Full Stops will be placed in the B tier, with Heathcliff being above Honglu as he is generally the better identity. Also, note that they need each other to be viable, so that can be a bit of an issue for a newer player who got only one, and for older players who have more options to replace one of them with. Next up, we have the magical Walpurgisnacht 6, and its 2 hyped up identities, Starting with Queen of Hatred Dawn, she is a unit that has been done very dirty in my opinion. Dawn is a charge envy damage dealer that has two forms, with one of them being suited better for boss encounters and the other for group fights. She constantly swaps between the two, but you have control over how fast she does so, and this identity comes with her very own signature ego that adds a skill 3 into her rotation. Her damage is pretty good, but it needs to scale over the course of the fight. So where's the catch? Well, it's team building. At the time of Dawn's release, Charge and Middle identities were often combined into Charge Envy, a prototype of the current Envy team that utilized identities like Multicrack Faust and, of course, Queen of Hatred Dawn. However, in Season 7, the slots of this team have been effectively filled out with middle identities, and the addition of Ricardo Heathcliff and Matthias Outis patched up all of the team's holes, making it possible to spam 6 Envy every turn and perform extremely well. With downturns being gone from the team, the Season 3 Middle Dawn identity started outperforming Queen of Hatred in every way that matters, and the Magical Girl ended up being reduced to a niche pick for group encounters due to her negative form AoE. She, however, still is a pretty good unit, just one that's fucked over by modern team building. And she technically does have a small niche, which is why she's going into the B tier above the full stops. Knight of Despair Rodion, on the other hand, is thriving. This identity also has two stances, but only one of them is relevant. In this cool stance, Rodion outputs good damage and has the single best sinking infliction profile in the game. Rodia's good stance is her negative one, meaning she needs to use her fairly weak defense first to get there. Or she could use Rhymeshank, which is an incredible sinking ego that has direct synergy with this identity due to the stance gimmick. With both the identity and the ego in play, your sinking stack skyrockets, and a large sinking stack enables many other great sinking identities, allowing them to perform at a ludicrous level, getting record after record. Knight of Despair Rodion is our second addition to the S tier, as she will be joining Solemn Lament Yesang, much like she often does on field. Although I still have him over her, as Rodion can be replaced in certain low turn count strategies, and she is a fantastic enabler, but she's not the win condition. Also, a lot of her value lies in Rhymeshank, which technically any Rodia could use. Next up, we're moving on to Walp 7. The first identity we'll look at is Alan Gregor, and his placement is a bit shaky. Gregor is a Bleed Tremor hybrid with access to Hemorrhage and follow-up attacks. Bonus resources are pretty valuable in Tremor, but unfortunately, Gregor is uniquely not allowed to print those with his follow-ups, so his main value lies in his Hemorrhage. This is one of the 3 damaging Tremor types, and it is used by a total of 2 identities right now, with Gregor being the better of the 2. Other than the conversion, his kit doesn't really offer anything remarkable, with average bursts, bad infliction, and some awkward conditionals. However, Hemorrhage alone is a valuable tool that can be used to power up classic Tremor in short fights greatly, and as Gregor is our best inflictor of this effect, he actually has use cases. That being said, I believe his placement will change drastically in Season 8. It's likely that Tremor will be upscaled next season, and this could mean 2 things for Gregor. Either we get a new Hemorrhage identity, and he drops 2 tiers and is forgotten forever, or Tremor gets stronger without a new Hemo identity, in which case Gregor goes up a tier thanks to getting more use cases. I believe the first option is far more probable, but who knows what might happen. Anyways, I am placing Gregor at the top of B for now, but I wanted to let you guys know that this placement is very likely to change in the near future. Hanafuda Ishmael is the second ID in the banner. She, much like Gregor, also uses follow-up attacks, but she implements them in a much better way. Ishmael is a tremor sinking identity with access to tremor decay for some general damage increases, and her main gimmick revolves around matching the sins of her skills to the color of her hand. Doing so successfully gives you access to a skill tree 2 in Kozan, which does good damage, has 5 coins, and is sinking count neutral. Using this skill every couple turns is already great value, but the rest of Ishmael's kit is also very count friendly while having decent coins and damage. However, the biggest source of Ishmael's value lies in her ego synergies. Her hand gimmick incentivizes ego usage, with it being especially effective when you use Gloom egos. And Ishmael actually has access to multiple potent Gloom egos for sinking. Both of her Zayin egos are very cheap and can provide you with Kozan a turn earlier than usual. Tidal Elegy is a great reusable source of damage with AoE, which allows Ishmael to plow through waves of enemies and bosses alike. And Bygone Days grants access to Echoes of the Manor in its corrosion, which is one of, if not the single most important supporting effect in sinking. The Bygone Days synergy is basically exclusive to high resource content like late stages of RR6, but it frees up a slot that you would usually give up to one of the butlers, so it's insanely good. Overall, Ishmael provides a ton of value, both with her natural offense of Kozan and her synergistic support via egos and decay infliction. She is a core member of the sinking team, and will be treated as such, with her taking up a spot in the S tier. You can kind of see a pattern of sinking identities at the top of the list, and as we move on to Walp 8, that pattern will not be broken. Faint Aroma and Solitude Ryoshu is another tremor sinking identity with follow-up attacks, similar to Hanafuda Ishmael, but she actually utilizes her kit in a vastly different way. Ryoshu has ammo, and whenever she runs out of it, she uses a follow-up attack before reloading. On top of that, she has petals, which, when stacked to max, trigger another follow-up attack. When a -40 SP enemy is hit, Ryoshu uses her skill 1 as a follow-up attack, and she does the same on stagger. She genuinely shoots enemies over and over and over again every single turn, which allows her to extract ginormous value out of butterflies, as she does not hurt the stack much while absolutely smothering the enemy with coins. Her physical damage is not at the level of Hanafuda Ishmael, but her utilization of butterflies and sinking itself on abnormalities is better, making her a similar in concept but different in practice core unit compared to Hanafuda Ishmael. Also, she stacks up Tremor to get extra value from Ishmael's decay for bonus synergy. Of course, her level of power is very similar, so she will be enjoying a spot in the S tier as well. Next up for the 8th Walpurgisnacht, we have Hornet Meursault, a Burn Bleed unit that has been released far too late. Meursault's claim to fame lies mostly in his burn prowess, as not only does the Sinner have better bleed options, but Hornet is just a subpar bleed identity anyways, with more effects centered around burn. However, the main way he gets value in burn is through burn count infliction, which is a dubious niche at best. On release, there was genuinely no need for it, but with the release of Blade Ryoshu and the announcement of the Thumb banner, people expected us to need more burn count. But, as it turned out, we don't. The thumbs are already count friendly, and the new Dawn Office identities also provide burn count. On the other hand, Tremor actually can see some issues due to Thumb Heathcliff's Psyche, meaning that Tremor is a more important bottleneck than Burn for all variants of a Scorch using composition. This means that directly replacing Thumb Meursault, who can contribute to the Tremor stack, with Hornet, who can't, only serves to downgrade the status side of his main archetype, with him already being an offensive downgrade compared to Thumb as well. Hornet Meursault will be joining Magic Bullet Outis in C tier for this, as he is dead to team building, but he's technically not an awful identity in a vacuum. He's just not needed when we have better options that are older and less exclusive than him. Moving on, we have finally reached the latest Walpurgisnacht event at the time of this video's release, the 9th Walp. This event has brought us two new Burn Tremor hybrids from the Dawn office in Faust and Gregor. Much like with the Full Stop office, I want to look at these identities at the same time, as they are intertwined by synergy, although they are not unusable solo, unlike the Full Stops. Both identities have access to Scorch, and they also get skills 3 twos that they can use both by transforming their skills 3s and their defenses, just like Mao Faust. I'm being reductive here for the sake of time, but if you want to see a full guide on these guys, check out my video on them in the description. Anyways, these two units can use 2 nukes per rotation, and their strongest skills are actually pretty powerful. Faust does more damage and gets more bursts, while Gregor supports his team with Dawn Herald, which allows him to indirectly contribute a great amount. As a duo, the units work well, they follow up on each other's nukes, and they can be slotted into virtually any variations of Burn, including the very restrictive 3-slot Ryoshu House of Spiders composition. While they themselves are already super solid units, Faust and Gregor also hyper-buff Don Sinclair, allowing him to come back and claim that spot in the A tier that I gave him earlier. If we consider the extra buffs on Sinclair as an extension of the value of the new Dawn Office identities, which it is, it's safe to say that Gregor and Faust are both sources of a lot of power for Burn in its many variations, so they deserve a high tier. I'm not placing them into S though, as while they do help their team a lot, they're not exactly game-breaking core units, and their place is the A tier, with Faust above Gregor and Gregor above Sinclair. Yes, it's true that Sinclair can sometimes outperform even Faust, but again, his strength is an extension of the value of these two, as without them, he's a C tier unit. And just like that, we're done with the annual Walpurgisnacht identity tier list. If you are confused by any of these rankings, do not go to the comments, but instead go watch me explain why they are where they are, because I know a lot of you skipped here instantly, even though I told you not to. But, of course, it's not that fun this way, so let's actually give names to all of the tiers to find the common thread between the units here. S tier is simple, it stands for sinking. The sinking archetype is the single most Walpurgisnacht reliant team in the game, as 4 extremely strong units hide in these banners, and on top of that, you've got 2 powerful egos locked up as well. If you want to splurge on Walp content, I recommend mass sharding all the sinking content to get yourself a strong sinking core. All of these identities synergize with each other, and the team that they end up creating is one hell of a beast. A tier is good Burn. These are the Burn identities that keep up with the current win conditions of Burn, and work well in long fights, while also putting up a fight in short encounters. It's likely that Burn will not get touched much in the future, so these guys can be a good investment to close out your House of Spiders team for Season 7. B tier will be called Potential Users. These units are not too bad, and can carve out niches for themselves if an encounter calls for it. Gregor has the most solid case here, while the others are lying in wait for a fight that calls for them, just below the surface of the meta. C tier is bad Burn. These units did not keep up with the evolution of their archetype, and as such, they're not particularly useful. As you can see, Burn also has a lot of Walp content, but I'd say sinking is still more Walp locked, as all the sinking identities are fantastic, while half of the Burn content here is not that good. D tier will simply be called better units available. Lantern Dawn and Regret Faust just got swept away by the tides of time, they never really did anything wrong. And E tier is... Well, I'll be nice today, and we'll just call it simply not good. Both Hook Lu and Rap Ryoshu ceased to exist when their archetypes got any kind of support, making them effectively prehistoric identities. With this, we're done with the tier list. I know that this will spark a lot of discussion, so if you disagree or want to add something, leave a comment and I might read it and respond. If you liked the video at any point, leave a like to let me know, and if you want to see more like this, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!